Hi, everybody. In this exercise, we'll practice calculating wages subject to the following taxes: FICA Social Security, FICA Medicare, FUTA, and SUTA. As always, I strongly recommend that you download and print the worksheets that accompany this lecture so that you can follow along with the video and practice calculating wages subject to employment taxes. As explained in the textbook and on the Chapter 10 and 11 highlights page, certain taxes are imposed on each employee's gross wage up to a wage base. Once any employee's cumulative gross wage exceeds that wage base, the employee's wages are exempt from that tax for the rest of the calendar year. The wage base for FICA Social Security usually changes each year. For 2017, the wage base was $127,200. For 2018, it is $128,400. FICA Medicare tax is imposed on all gross wages without limitation. There is no wage base. The FUTA and California SUTA wage base has remained at $7,000 for many years. Let's look at the schedule. We are given the following information for each employee: their name, their year-to-date gross wages through October 31st, and the gross wages they are to be paid in the month of November. Our job is to calculate the gross wages for the month of November that are subject to each type of tax. It is very important to understand that the year-to-date gross wages have already been paid to the employees, and all the payroll tax on the year-to-date wages have already been paid. The only reason we need the year-to-date gross wage column is to see if employees have exceeded or are bumping up against a wage base. I think this concept will become clearer as we work through the exercise. Let's practice. Kathleen. Before the month of November, Kathleen had already been paid $126,700 in wages for this year. This is not quite in excess of the FICA Social Security wage base of $128,400, but by the time the November wages of $7,000 are paid, she will exceed the wage base. So some of her November wages will be subject to FICA Social Security tax, and some will be exempt. The easiest way to make that calculation is to subtract the prior year-to-date gross wages from the wage base. That will calculate the remaining salaries subject to FICA Social Security tax for the rest of the year. Let's do that calculation. $128,400 wage base minus $126,700 wages on which tax have already been paid equals $1,700 of wages still subject to FICA Social Security tax. The rest of her gross wages are exempt from Social Security tax. So put $1,700 in the FICA Social Security wages column. There is no limit on wages subject to FICA Medicare tax, so all $7,000 of Kathleen's November salary is subject to FICA Medicare tax, so put $7,000 in that column. The FUTA and SUTA wage base is $7,000. Kathleen's year-to-date gross before November 1st exceeds that amount. So all FUTA and SUTA tax has already been paid for Kathleen, and her November wages are exempt from those taxes. So put 0 in the FUTA and SUTA wages column. Let's do Anahoni next. I think that should be Anthony. Before November, Anthony had already earned $6,800 in gross wages. This is not even close to the FICA Social Security wage base. Accordingly, all of his $500 of gross wages for the month of November is subject to FICA Social Security tax. So put $500 in that column. There is no limit on wages subject to FICA Medicare tax, so all of Anthony's $500 November salary is subject to Medicare tax. Put $500 in that column. Before November, Anthony already earned $6,800 in gross wages. This is not quite in excess of the FUTA and SUTA wage base of $7,000. But by the time November wages of $500 is paid, he will exceed the wage base. So some of his November wages will be subject to FUTA and SUTA tax, and some will be exempt. The easiest way to make that calculation is to subtract the prior year gross from the wage base. That will calculate the remaining salary subject to FUTA and SUTA tax for the rest of the year. $7,000 minus $6,800 equals $200 of wages still subject to FUTA and SUTA tax. The rest of his gross wages are exempt, so put $200 in the FUTA and SUTA column. Nicole. Before November, Nicole had already earned $15,000 in gross wages. This is not even close to the FICA Social Security wage base of $128,400. Accordingly, all of her $2,500 gross wages for the month of November is subject to Social Security tax. So put $2,500 in that column. There is no limit on wages subject to FICA Medicare tax, so all $2,500 of Nicole's November salary is subject to FICA Medicare tax. Put $2,500 in that column. Before November, Nicole had already earned $15,000 in gross wages. This is in excess of the FUTA-SUTA wage base of $7,000. Accordingly, all FUTA and SUTA tax has already been paid for Nicole, and all of her November wages are exempt from FUTA-SUTA tax. So put 0 in that column. Let's skip down and do Gracie next. Before November, Gracie had already earned $5,000 in gross wages. This is not even close to the FICA Social Security wage base of $128,400. Accordingly, all $1,500 of her wages for the month of November is subject to Social Security tax. So put $1,500 in the Social Security wages column. There is no limit on Medicare tax, so all $1,500 of Gracie's salary is subject to Medicare tax, so put $1,500 in that column. And before November, Gracie had already earned $5,000 in gross wages. This is not in excess of the FUTA and SUTA wage base of $7,000. Are any of her November wages subject to FUTA and SUTA tax? Let's check it out. $7,000 wage base minus the amount that on which tax has already been paid equals $2,000 wages still subject to FUTA-SUTA tax. But her gross wage for November is only $1,500. So even after the payment of her November salary, she will not have exceeded the FUTA-SUTA wage base. Therefore, all of her November wages are subject to FUTA-SUTA tax. Put $1,500 in the FUTA-SUTA wage column. Why don't you pause this video and finish the worksheet for the rest of the employees? When you're done, start the video again to check your answers. Okay, so here's Zoe's information. We've already done Gracie. Here's the answer for Dolly. And the answer for Trey. Keisha. Chi. Ahmed. Carlos. June. And Marie. Did you get them all right? If any of your answers do not agree with mine, please pause the video and examine my calculations to see if you can spot and fix your error. It is important that you understand these basic calculations before we continue to more advanced payroll problems, so please do not hesitate to send me a message through Canvas if you have any questions. That's all for this video. In the next video, we'll calculate the employer's payroll tax expense for a simple payroll problem and write the related journal entries. See you next time.